That was a good presentation. I don't think anyone claims to not need a new water plant. I don't claim that we don't need a new water plant. We need one. It's how it gets funded. 2019, it started to go down. Then all of a sudden, it started to get in dire straits. Okay, so let's go to the rate decrease that I and other council members voted for. We voted for that decrease, and we did it knowing that we were going to raise rates. The rate decrease that we vote for in 4 years from that vote, it will have to go up from that vote based on inflation. So we took that vote thinking our staff could use the reserve funds for a 4-year span. Then we would raise rates purely based on inflation.
In your presentation, we are going out to bond and what it takes to go out to bond.
Yes, absolutely. So our plan at this point is to issue a bond for the first phase of this project. We're estimating that would be around a $60 million bond. That process would start in August. We would come to council with an ordinance in September, and then the funding would come in October. So during that time, though, that roughly 2 months, 2 to 3 months that we spend preparing for that, one of the important things that we have to do as part of bonding is go to get a rating. And as we've discussed in the past, the rating for the water fund has historically been very good. But anytime you go to bond, you have to get a new rating. So when we do that, we get on the phone with Fitch or Moody's, S&P, and we present to them our financial plan. We talk about the project, and we talk about the 10-year forecast for the fund. And we do need to show that we have the funding in place to be able to pay for that debt service we're proposing that we take on. So, and then they determine based on that financial information and the project, what our rating is. Is it AA? Is it single A? Is it AA minus? You know, what that is. That rating has a very big effect on the interest rates that we would then qualify for and that we could expect to get from investors. So I think it's important to remember investors have no obligation to loan us money, right? We have to make the case and show them that we are a good investment and that we can make good on our promises to repay that debt. So when we're meeting with those rating agencies, the most important things they look at is, again, our ability to repay the loans and coverage. They want to make sure that we have enough to cover not just our operating costs, but our debt and then some. They want us to have cushion, right? Just like in our own personal finances, you wouldn't want to take on a mortgage or a car payment that would take you to the limit every single month, right? So same idea with this kind of borrowing. We need to show them that we can make those payments. If we show a financial forecast that shows that we cannot make those payments because our revenues in the fund aren't sufficient, we will not get a rating and we can't bond. That's kind of a non-starter from that perspective. If we are able to bond, if we show that we have enough to make the payments, but maybe we don't have enough of that coverage, we would likely get a lower rating, and that would mean a much higher interest rate on our bonds. If we were to then not be able to maintain that coverage ratio, saying we have enough revenue to cover our bonds and then some, we would then be in default of those bonds. And not just the new bonds, but our existing bonds in the fund. So it could affect those as well if we take on more debt and can't maintain the ratios for both of them. So, and when you go down the road of defaulting, then that kind of becomes a legal question, and you could potentially, investors, in the worst case scenario, could take you to court and compel you to set your rates accordingly to make to stay in compliance with your covenants.
But we're told we can't go to bond.
That's correct.
Because you've decided to not try.
If we are not able to show that we can make our future debt payments, we cannot get a rating and therefore cannot bond.
But you haven't tried, so you don't know if you can get a rating, correct?
We've talked to our financial advisors and our bond counsel. We would need their support in order to do that. And without their support, if they see our financial forecast shows we can't make those payments, we cannot start that process without them.
So you'd suggested that 3 months reserve funds would be used as a guide. And what is the reasonable limit for reserve funds or legal limit? Or where do you stop reserving money?
So, Mr. Mayor, Councilor Wallen, I don't have the authority to speak on the legal limit, but I know on the industry guidelines, we look often at bond rating agencies and their recommendations in terms of days cash on hand would probably surprise you. That to be a highly rated agency, so if you are going to go out for revenue bonds, let's say, as a utility, and you wanted to keep your interest rates as low as possible, you'd want to be highly rated so that you could maintain. There are many things, many factors that go into a bond rating, as you can understand. And days cash on hand over 365 days is often an average. That some of these AA, AAA utilities have days cash, so high reserves that are outstanding. So that limit, I'm not sure there's an upper limit if you're really serious about getting an excellent bond rating. But there are costs to that, as you can imagine. There's costs to having high reserves, and I wouldn't recommend going any more than the 3 months that we've discussed.
That's pretty typical for municipalities.
Yes, in fact, that often we look at your current bond documents to determine if it is pre-specified, what limit or what minimum operating reserve is required. But you do not have that. So sometimes it's 2 months, so 60 to 90 days of cash is sometimes the minimum that you'll see. But, if you look at around the industry, 3 months is even not that unusual.